Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, giving you the edge you need to get into the colleges of your dreams, with your host, Steve Schwartz. That's me. Today, we're talking with David Singh. So let's get started.
Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, David. How are you doing today?
Doing really great, Steve. Really glad to be here.
Thanks for coming on. Now, you've got a really fascinating background. You've actually helped admissions officers craft questions for admissions interviews, and now you're at Huron Academic. Tell us a little bit about that and about yourself.
Yeah, no, so it's really exciting to be at Huron Academic. And I think even before Huron, the last sort of 10 years I've spent working both in different businesses as well as helping out with high schools. I sit on a few high school boards and figuring out all of that. But with Huron Academic, and so all that to say is I have good experience in the academic market and admission side. But with Huron Academic, what we do is we help schools find the best talent using video admissions. And what we do is we help schools send out video questions and then get video responses back, as well as timed written responses from their students. So today I'd love to share a little bit about how some of the schools are using it and thinking about it, and what some of your listeners could be doing to prepare as they start going through these mediums in the admissions process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like video interviews are becoming more and more common. So I think this is something that our listeners on College Admissions Toolbox will definitely want to know about more and more as time goes on. Tell us a little bit about, how you actually came to be in the position where you're going to admissions officers and they're asking you for advice. How do you get in that position and what's it like? What are they looking for from you?
Yeah, no, so we spent a lot of time over the last 4 years developing the platform and worked with a lot of schools at the very senior and specialized graduate levels of programs that are looking for very niche things like PhDs in finance that are looking for very specific attributes along the way. But we've also worked with a number of, and continue to grow in the undergraduate market of schools that coming out of high school, there's not a lot of life experience you have from that you would as a PhD. So it's kind of figuring out how do you get to know a candidate in a general way. And video is a great way of doing that. And we help schools break down the interview and looking for some core skills that folks in high school in grades 11 and 12 really are experts at in those experiences. It's designed around how do we showcase exceptional grade 11 and grade 12 talent to schools.
What goes into making a compelling interview question? And what kind of themes are they looking for?
Yeah, so we work with schools. The interview itself has a welcome video. There's a set of practice questions that the student can go through or the applicant can go through, and then there's the questions themselves. And we work with the schools to figure out what's important to that school. So for almost the same reasons that someone is interested in a program, in that it's focusing on leadership, or it's focusing on creativity, or it's focusing on that well-rounded liberal arts education, those are the program themes that we work with the schools to try and then build questions against. And a good question to us is one that allows a candidate to tell a good story and to tell a good experience. It's not a 3-part question. They're not trick questions, like how many light bulbs are there in New York City. We try not to get our schools to ask that, but to let the candidates tell a story as to why they think they're suitable for that program.
Could you tell us about the process you've been through, maybe with a particular example of a particular school? I know you've worked with some top ones, right, like Stanford, Yale. Tell us a little bit about, one of those examples and really walk us through the process.
Yeah, so we work with one of the top engineering schools in the world. We're actually with a few of them, but in one of those examples, we meet with their admissions directors as well as the program directors and really figure out the themes of the school. We then break those down into competencies that the school is going to test for. So they might ask 5 questions, and each question is going to ask against a certain competency. And that allows the school to then, for each competency, ask 10 or 15 questions that gets randomly picked, so that no student gets the exact same question along the way. And so in that, walking one school through, they were really looking for that analytical ability. And so they were really trying to also marry that with team skills and trying to figure that out. So it was what was the most complicated school project that you'd worked on, and how did you solve it? And so an example of a question like that is ideally, if someone talks about team, that's great, but they're going to tell you about the project that they worked on and that what the outcome of that was. And in that example of a question, you want to say, here's what I did in the problem, or here's what the problem was, here's what I did, and then here's what the outcome was. And a top graded answer is one that sort of says, here's what I pulled out of that whole experience and why that's important to me joining that program. But again, it's trying to help schools figure out the core attributes and then build some questions around that.
Absolutely. And even just that last little bit you said, it's such a key insight. The idea that a top rated answer would be something where you really paused and reflected on what you got out of the experience. So, for any college interview, it's really not just about what you've done, but what you've learned from what you've done. That ability to reflect, I think, demonstrates maturity that schools are really looking for. And it also shows that you did not go through that experience or talk about that experience or engage in that experience or extracurricular maybe simply for the purpose of putting down your college application. It definitely takes a little something extra to have that kind of have that relationship to your own experience in order to be able to reflect on it.
Totally. And I think on that, it's the same thing as if I'm giving resume feedback to someone, the two words that I ask the most is just, so what? And after the end of a sentence on a resume, if you write, so what? If I have to write, so what at the end of your bullet point, it means that you didn't hit the point right. And with video questions, it's, again, you can tell a good story, but if you don't have that so what hook back into the answer, it makes it less compelling. Now, again, it's not going to be wrong, and if you don't have it, you're not going to bomb the interview, so don't sort of get stressed out about that. It's more around the more you can get in that so what sort of right hook. I'm not a boxer, but if I was a boxer, I'd probably use that analogy better than that. But it's really around that so what. So here's why it's important. And I think something that is also important for students is, again, almost coming back to admit yourself first into that program. Even before you get to the video interview, it's like, this is why I should be in this program. It's not why I want to be in the program, because everyone wants to be in good programs, but it's why should I be in the program? And again, it's the so what about you in that program.
Absolutely. The so what comes back to, why should I care about this? And then as you're walking into the interview, it really is, you have to think about their perspective. Why should they accept you? Everybody wants to go to Harvard. Everybody wants to go to Yale. Not everybody, but those are obviously highly desirable schools. The question is, what do you have to offer them? And it's about having compelling experiences, making the interviewer connect with you emotionally and feel invested in your future, and the fact that, maybe if they're an alumnus or something, that they're going to, that your attendance at their school will make them feel proud.
For sure. And I think it also helps to, I think this probably is more applicable to some of your grade 10 and grade 11 listeners. I think some of your grade 12 listeners as well. But you almost want to start looking at what you're planning to do over the next few years as you lead up to college application. Say, what are the so what moments of your life? Like, what are those really sort of transformative experiences? And they don't need to be you saved the planet or you saved a village in Africa, like that's great, and I think that would be a good story, but it sometimes can be as myopic as, I think we mentioned this in another session along the way, Steve, was really around, there was one student that was really trying to tell that transformative experience, and it was them going out of their way to be part of a musical in the school play, and really try to take that small part, saying, I did something extra, I did something a little different. And those are the kind of experiences that people want to hear about, that pushed you who you are, because at the end of the day, all great institutions are trying to push your thinking and push your experiences, and they want to know that you're able to do that and that you're going to succeed in those kind of environments. So you want to tell those stories that you've been in those situations before.
Well, absolutely. It doesn't have to be something incredibly impressive sounding that is on the level of like saving the world like a superhero or something. Even a small part in a school play. Again, coming back to that ability to reflect on your experiences. Make them like you, show that you're an interesting person, show that you have that maturity and capacity for self-reflection, where you can, tell a compelling story about even something that might seem relatively minor. So yeah, obviously you want to, if you're earlier in the process, you're in 9th grade, 10th grade, you have the ability to still do some cool stuff and with your extracurriculars or have some cool experiences, way before it comes time to apply. But if it's fall of senior year right now, you're putting together your applications, you could still look back at your resume, find something that you could tell a cool story about, reflect on it, and walk into an interview with something, meaningful to share.
Yeah, and Steve, I see this a lot where I'm talking to students who are coming in, and you know what, maybe it takes a few conversations with them to sort of say, they think they don't have any of these experiences, but there's sometimes after a bit of reflection, you do have them, and that's great. And sometimes even after a bit of reflection saying, well, hey, if I had done it this way, I would have had a better experience. And that is almost just as good. It's like a B+ on the answer in terms of the experience. It's very, very close to an A from a response of saying, you know what, I was working on this project and it really failed because I didn't have the right communication skills with my team, but had I done it this way, I would have succeeded at it. And I think that it's not about being perfect. It's about being, to your point, self-reflective and trying to find those experiences. So you don't have to have had them sometimes. You can talk about what you wish you had had. And that's just as good sometimes.
Absolutely. Learning from your mistakes and demonstrating that you can is really important. You can think about how things might have gone better, how things might have gone differently. And that's going to impress them too. No question about it.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for putting down and sharing it with us. I know that the video interviews are getting more popular. They're growing. More colleges are using them. What are some common mistakes that applicants make, when going for a video interview as opposed to a regular one?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is that when we're talking to students, is they get more nervous than they need to be. The system is not designed to catch you up or trip you up. It's meant to be a very natural process. So with the video interview, there will be a practice question that you'll go through in our system. And that's for the most part for other systems as well. And the practice questions will let you get comfortable with the process. No one's going to see those, but you're able to get comfortable with the process. The other big thing is that take the prep time. There's prep time before the question, just to write down a few notes on what you think you'd like to do and almost have a plan. It's like when you're writing an essay on one of the tests, you want to have a little bit of a plan before you go in. So take the 30 seconds of prep time that they give you and say, this is what I want to talk about. The other tip is look at the camera and smile. It's amazing what happens when there's a whole bunch of psychology written about why smiling is an important thing in our species. And so take that extra time to to smile along the way. The other bit is if you do make a mistake, you sort of get your words mumbled up or you forget your pause. Just pause, say, you know what, I've lost track here. I'm going to regroup and then keep going on. They know they're not looking for absolute perfection. They're looking for people who have the core skills that they're looking for and the attributes. And so it's not about being perfect. It's about being yourself. And that's fine to make mistakes in the process.
So definitely, it's really important to be authentic and own up to a mistake. Just move on, take a moment, pause, reflect, go forward. Restart if you have to. Maybe definitely having an outline of what you want to talk about before you go to an interview is really important. Preparation is really useful. So those are definitely some good tidbits of advice that you shared. Thanks for those, David.
Yeah. Just on the plan portion, and I should be specific on this, of making sure the plan is to answer the question. The thing that sometimes candidates will do is they'll answer another question, but not the question that's asked of them. And so my dad always used to give me this advice when I was going to write tests. He says, always read the question twice. Yeah. And so you can read the question and ours to be there, but make sure your plan is answering the question that's there. And if you don't have a good answer to that, it's fine to say, you know what, I just don't have a good answer to that, but I'd like to tell you something else. That's also fine too.
Yeah, sure, but definitely if they have a list of, even a traditional interview, if they have a list of questions there that they're going to evaluate you on later, they're going to notice if you didn't actually answer what they were going for. Yeah. So just own up. If you can't handle one, own up. Be authentic, be yourself, and take it from there. Definitely. Have you ever come across students who are, practicing for an interview, or, doing, maybe they screw up in some sort of major way. Have you seen like any particularly worst, awful moments in admissions interviews?
Yeah, so we sometimes get the bloopers that are sent from our clients. We don't actually watch the videos. Every video that comes through the platform, we deal with dozens and hundreds of thousands of applicants, so we can't keep up with that. My favorite one though was once a candidate was applying, and they were in a building, and I think it was they were in must have been a high school dorm, because they were in a dorm of some kind at a boarding school, and the fire alarm went off, and it was this sort of boop, like this big sort of in the building kind of noise, and the candidate was trying to give their answer between the beeps as they were sort of going out the door with their laptop. And so it was great. One candidate they basically changed shirts between every interview. So every question, there was 5 questions that were asked, and I guess they had they had just done their laundry, so they had a bunch of shirts. And at the end, they sort of mentioned this, because no one had really actually noticed that between every question they had changed shirts, and they wove that in. So that was creative to see along the way. But the best was that fire alarm one, because it was actually well done, but it was it was not intended.
No, certainly not. Those are both pretty good ones. Thanks for sharing those. Have you ever seen like a student who went from like being awful at interviewing to being amazing? Is there a particular light bulb moment or moment of insight that can lead someone maybe to get over anxiety or get over stress that you've seen with a particular applicant? Yeah,
so one comes to mind in particular, and it was really around less around the video side of things, but just not being ready for interviews. And the trick was just let's list out, the schools are looking for, regardless of the program, they're looking for similar things. They might be slightly different, but they're looking for leadership abilities. They're looking for good stories of your experience, your passion for the program, and times when you've had to stretch yourself. So those sort of general stories along the way. And so what we did was at the beginning of the questions weren't going well, like in terms of they were rambling on, they were trying to think of the answer in the moment. And so what we did was we just listed out 10 or 12 good stories that were relatively sort of on pace with what the various programs that they were applying to were, and that they just had these stories sort of ready to go. And there was a few times they probably caught about 80 to 90% of the questions with these stories. And there's a few times where they asked very specific questions. They didn't have a story ready to go. But because they had so many good stories and examples prepared in their mind in short, concise answers, it made them that much more comfortable and that much more confident. And they also didn't seem rehearsed. They were trying to sort of weave them in after a while. So I think the ability to think broadly of some of your experiences and to bring them together in some good stories in advance is going to help you a lot across all the interviews that you'll take.
That's a great piece of advice right there. Definitely. I love it. Have a few key themes, a few key stories that you can often go back to when those questions come up, and you can reuse them for all your interviews.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's great advice, David. Thanks so much for sharing that. I want to shift gears now and move into the lightning round, where I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. You give me some rapid fire responses. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Great. What's your number one piece of advice for the college admissions process?
I think picking up on the last one is having a list of where you want to go. And sort of not so much a list of your stories, but have a really good idea of the programs you want to take and have good reasons as to why you want to go into those programs so that you can admit yourself first. So find your top 10, your top 20 programs, and then go through and really trying to find a way that you can admit to really focus on your 5 to 10 that you think are the most applicable schools that you want to be at.
Definitely. Really key. Could you share with us one habit that you believe contributes to admissions success?
I think that the ability to being organized is really important. So knowing that focus on where you want to go in terms of that first point, but then now having a good list and understanding what's important at each school and being organized to say that these schools care about these things more than others, that you've been involved in some of the admissions either if you can get to campus, great. If you can be part of some of their live chats along the way and be connected with them. And again, you don't want to do this with hundreds of schools. There's no way you could possibly do that, even dozens of schools.
Sure.
And I think even 10 is a stretch, to be honest. I think if you really do some research, you might look at 20 schools at the beginning, focus it down to your top 5, and make sure you have some reasonable chances to get into all those programs. And then being organized is really, really important.
That's all really great advice. Thanks, David. Could you share with us one online admissions-related resource that you absolutely love?
So I read a lot. I think, to be honest, Steve, I've loved the podcasts that you've been putting together. I think the way you've done them, I think are great. I'm sure that there's loads that of various and all your sort of content on the site is great stuff. That's not a softball pitch. I do mean it. I think it's some great content. I think it's worth an additional read for your listeners.
Well, it's so nice of you to say, David. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. What are you up to these days? What's next for you?
So at Kira, we're doing lots of great stuff. It's hard to keep up with the team. We are growing left, right, and center. We continue to be focusing on the admissions side, but we're just building out new career services portals. So it's about how do we get students into college, and then how do we get them out into the working world? So everywhere from helping with reference checking to mock interviews to really trying to help students figure out what they want to do with their career services teams, because we're really passionate about helping young people get jobs as well. Because as a taxpayer, I hope people continue to thrive in the economy and I don't have to pay as many taxes, and the countries continue to do well. And I think that's what our economy and our society needs people to be, finding great jobs. And I think that's something that we can help with.
No, absolutely. It sounds like you guys have a great mission, and you'll be helping students through every step of the process, from entering university to what to do afterwards. So I'm excited to see more great stuff coming from you guys. Thanks so much for joining us, David. Where can folks find you guys online?
So they can find us at Kira Academic. We talk to a lot about on the admissions process there on our Twitter handle. They can find us at kiraacademic.com. And we're on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. And we always love to hear from students and hear their perspectives as well, because that's what we like to say. We're a student-forward company, and we happen to work with admissions officers.
Awesome. Well, glad we got you guys on our side too. Thanks so much for joining us, David. Take care.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks for listening to College Admissions Toolbox. Head over to www.collegeadmissionstoolbox.com to get more free tools and resources that will help you get into the colleges of your dreams. There are a million books out there about applying to college, but it's hard to know which ones are worth buying and which are just a waste of time. When I was applying to college, I felt like most of them weren't really saying anything that I didn't already know. And a lot of the others were just plain boring. So I've put together a list of the best books I've read on the admissions process. I've got books on there about college essays, scholarships, and test prep. So check it out. It's at collegeadmissionstoolbox.com/books.